world's second-largest economy, a hidden force drives the gears of industry, innovation, and influence. They are vast. They are powerful, and they answer not to markets, but to the state. Welcome to China's unique economic model, where capitalism meets command, and enterprises often wear the red badge of government oversight. This is the story of state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, the backbone of state capitalism in China. What are state-owned enterprises? State-owned enterprises, SOEs, are companies in which the government holds significant or full ownership. In China, they are more than just businesses, they're tools of national strategy. From energy to steel, from banking to telecom, SOEs dominate key sectors of the Chinese economy. Some are directly controlled by the central government, others by provincial or municipal authorities. But all share one common trait. Their interests are aligned not just with profit, but with policy. China classifies many of these enterprises as strategic, or pillar, industries, meaning they're considered essential for national security, economic stability, and long-term development. Unlike private firms, SOEs often enjoy preferential loans from state-owned banks, easy access to land and licenses, protection from competition, and even bailouts when needed. That doesn't mean they're always inefficient or slow. In fact, many SOEs are tech-forward, aggressive, and globally competitive, especially when backed by state capital. But to understand how China built this powerful hybrid of socialism and capitalism, we need to rewind the clock. A brief history of state capitalism in China. China's flirtation with state capitalism began decades ago. In the years following the communist victory in 1949, the Chinese economy was fully nationalized. Nearly all means of production were state-owned. Private enterprise was virtually non-existent. This centralized model, modeled on the Soviet system, led to large-scale industrialization, but also inefficiencies, famines, and stagnation. Everything changed in 1978, when Deng Xiaoping launched China's era of economic reform and opening up. Suddenly, markets were reintroduced. Foreign investment was allowed, and private businesses began to emerge. But the state didn't fade away, instead, it evolved. SOEs were restructured. Many were corporatized, partially privatized, and even listed on stock exchanges. But the government retained control, often through majority ownership, golden shares, and Communist Party committees embedded in company boards. This created the dual-track system that defines China today, a mix of competitive private firms and strategically guided state-owned giants. In essence, China did not abandon socialism, it rebranded it. As the report notes, China's SOEs are not just commercial actors, they are instruments of state policy. The economic footprint of SOEs are not just symbolic in China, they are economically massive. According to the report, SOEs account for over 40% of China's GDP, roughly 50% of fixed asset investments, and a significant portion of national employment, especially in heavy industries. But these numbers don't tell the full story. The real influence of SOEs is concentrated in key areas. Checkmark banking and finance. All of China's major banks are state-owned. This means the financing flows where the government wants it to. Need to build a high-speed rail line for rural provinces? An SOE gets the contract and the loan. Checkmark energy and resources. State giants like Sinopec, PetroChina, and State Grid dominate oil, gas, and electricity. They don't just power China. They represent the country in international energy diplomacy. Checkmark infrastructure and construction. SOEs build China's roads, dams, airports, and subways, and not just in China. From Kenya's railways to Ecuador's hydroelectric plants, Chinese SOEs are global developers. Checkmark telecommunications and tech. Huawei, while privately owned, operates in an SOE-like model with strong state backing. Meanwhile, companies like China Mobile and China Telecom are state-owned directly. In short, SOEs aren't just big, they're strategically positioned to carry out Beijing's long-term goals. SOEs versus the private sector, a tale of two economies. Despite the might of SOEs, most job creation and innovation in China comes from private companies. Private firms employ over 80% of urban workers, contribute more than 60% of China's GDP, and are responsible for the majority of new patents and tech startups. Yet, SOEs continue to receive easier access to credit, preferential treatment in government contracts, and regulatory shielding. It's an uneven playing field. One analyst described it as market socialism with Chinese characteristics, where the market plays, but the referee is also a player. The report also highlights a term worth remembering: the observable state sector, meaning the SOEs that can be clearly identified and tracked. But there's also a hidden state sector, firms that appear private but have complex ownership ties to the state or the Communist Party. This blurs the line between public and private, and makes it even harder to assess the true extent of state capitalism. In China, the question is not whether a company is state-owned or not, but how close it is to the state. The advantage and burden of being an SOE for SOEs, government support, is a double-edged sword. Checkmark on the one hand, they're protected from market shocks. They don't have to worry about going bankrupt the way private firms do. Crossmark on the other hand, they face heavy political oversight. Party committees are embedded in their structure. Promotion often depends on political loyalty as much as performance. Many SOEs carry social obligations, maintaining employment in depressed regions, undertaking unprofitable but politically necessary projects, or aligning with national campaigns like common prosperity. This creates what the report calls soft budget constraints. In other words, they know the government will bail them out, so they can afford inefficiency. Studio microphone. Example. The case of China Eastern Airlines. In 2008, China Eastern lost hundreds of millions of dollars. A private firm would have folded. Instead, the state injected billions and replaced the top executives, keeping the airline alive. So, are SOEs bloated monopolies or tools of stability? The answer, like much in China, is both. Studio microphone, SOEs at the local level, the hidden layer of power. While much attention is paid to central government SOEs, there are thousands more at the local level. These are often owned by provincial and municipal governments, and they serve both economic and political purposes. Building housing and roads, running local utilities, managing investments for regional officials. But here's the twist. Local governments use these SOEs to borrow off the books, creating massive local debt bubbles. The report warns that this could become a ticking time bomb, especially if these local SOEs can't repay what they owe. State ownership at the subnational level masks the true scale of China's public debt. Going global. The rise of Chinese SOEs abroad. State-owned enterprises aren't just domestic giants. Over the last 2 decades, they've become global actors. In 2013, President Xi Jinping unveiled the Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion strategy to build infrastructure and influence across Asia, Africa, and beyond. Who's building those roads, ports, and pipelines? Chinese SOEs. Firms like China Communications Construction Company, CCCC, building highways in Kenya and ports in Sri Lanka. State Grid Corporation of China, acquiring power assets in Brazil and the Philippines. China National Petroleum Corporation, CNPC, drilling oil in Iraq and Sudan. These are not just business decisions, they're geopolitical ones. Chinese SOEs operating abroad often act as extensions of state policy, combining commercial objectives with political strategy. Studio microphone. Strategic industries, where the state never lets go. While China has opened up parts of its economy to foreign investors and private firms, certain industries remain strictly state-controlled, and always will. These are the strategic sectors, which include defense and aerospace, energy and electricity, telecommunications and cybersecurity, transportation and logistics, finance and banking. The logic is clear. Control the arteries of power, and you control the lifeblood of the nation. In these sectors, even if private companies are allowed to operate, they must partner with or remain subordinate to state-owned entities. In fact, the report notes that China uses industrial policy, massive subsidies, government procurement, and protectionist rules to ensure its SOEs lead in these areas. Studio microphone. Example. Semiconductor industry. China has declared chipmaking a national priority. Billions have been funneled into SOEs like SMIC, despite lagging behind global giants. Private firms are welcome, but only as long as they align with the state's roadmap. Studio microphone. The invisible hand of the party. At the heart of the Chinese SOE system lies a unique mechanism, Communist Party control. Every central SOE has a party committee, often led by the company's chairman or CEO. These committees review all major decisions, ensure alignment with party ideology, and report directly to government authorities. Since Xi Jinping came to power, this influence has intensified. Xi Jinping said, "The party must lead everything, including the economy." This means that even if an SOE is publicly listed, has international investors, and operates in global markets, it still ultimately answers to the Chinese Communist Party. In essence, shareholders matter, but the party matters more. Studio microphone. Global reactions, trust, fear, and competition. China's global expansion through SOEs hasn't gone unnoticed. Western governments increasingly view these companies as instruments of political influence, not just economic actors. Concerns include unfair competition, SOEs receiving hidden subsidies while competing with private firms abroad, Data security, especially with telecom and tech SOEs. Debt diplomacy. Projects under the Belt and Road Initiative saddling poor nations with unsustainable loans. Studio microphone. Example. Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, built by a Chinese SOE. When Sri Lanka couldn't repay the loans, it leased the port to China for 99 years. Critics call it a modern-day colonial foothold. In response, countries like the US, Australia, and the EU have started blocking Chinese acquisitions, tightening investment screening, and promoting alternatives to Chinese infrastructure deals. Studio microphone, efficiency, innovation, and reform. Can SOEs keep up? Here's the billion-dollar question. Are SOEs efficient? Are they innovative? The answer is complicated. While some SOEs, like China Mobile or CRRC, are global leaders, many others are bloated, over-leveraged, and inefficient. The Chinese government knows this. Reforms have been underway for years. Introducing mixed ownership, allowing private investment into SOEs, forcing SOEs to compete in certain markets, and tying executive bonuses to performance metrics. But progress is slow, because reform often clashes with politics. After all, SOEs are not just economic tools, they're political assets. Reforming SOEs risks weakening party control, and that's a risk the leadership is reluctant to take. Studio microphone. Transition to final chapter. In the final chapter of this documentary, we'll look ahead. What is the future of state capitalism in China? Will SOEs become more efficient or more political? Will China's hybrid model dominate the 21st century, or collapse under its contradictions? Studio microphone. The future of China's state capitalism. As we look ahead, one thing is clear. China is not retreating from state capitalism, it's doubling down. Under President Xi Jinping, the role of the state has grown stronger, not weaker. SOEs are not being privatized. They're being fortified, streamlined, and digitized. The next generation of Chinese SOEs is being reshaped around AI and automation, green energy, digital finance, and the yuan. Strategic self-sufficiency in technology and semiconductors. These changes are happening under the umbrella of Xi's signature slogan. The state advances, the private sector retreats. Made in China 2025, an effort to dominate high-tech industries, largely through SOEs. Dual circulation strategy. Reduce dependence on foreign markets, grow domestic consumption, with SOEs as anchors. Common prosperity. Narrowing inequality, with SOEs tasked to shoulder more social responsibility. It's a vision where the state remains the engine of economic power, not a regulator of private ambition, but the driver itself. Studio microphone. Challenges ahead. Cracks in the foundation. Visuals. Closed factories, protests, news reports on local debt, aging population visuals. But state capitalism is not without serious risks. Red circle mounting debt. Many SOEs are heavily indebted. Local governments use SOEs to borrow and build, but repayment often depends on continued growth, which may not be sustainable. Red circle misallocation of capital. When loans are based on political priorities instead of market logic, bad investments happen. White elephant projects pile up, from empty stadiums to underused railways. Red circle stifling innovation. In sectors like tech, SOEs often lag behind private firms in speed and creativity. Over-reliance on state planning could stifle the very dynamism China needs to stay globally competitive. Red circle global pushback. More countries are scrutinizing Chinese SOEs and rejecting their bids over security and transparency concerns. This could limit China's international expansion. The greatest threat to China's model may not come from the outside world, but from the contradictions within it. Studio microphone. A balancing act between control and growth. China's leadership now walks a tightrope. On one side, the need for control, to ensure stability, implement policy, and preserve Communist Party authority. On the other, the need for growth, to satisfy the middle class, compete globally, and maintain legitimacy. SOEs are the bridge between these two imperatives. They are asked to be profitable but policy-driven, competitive but compliant, market-facing but party-loyal. Can they be all of these things at the same time? The answer is not clear, and the stakes are enormous. Studio microphone. Section 15. The global impact, a new economic superpower? Whatever happens in China doesn't stay in China. As Chinese SOEs expand, as state capitalism asserts itself, the global economy must adapt. We're entering an era where traditional capitalist systems face direct competition from state-guided models. Global companies must learn to compete not just with other firms, but with entire governments disguised as corporations. And nations will increasingly have to decide, Cooperate with China's SOEs or resist their influence? In the 21st century, the world isn't just competing with China. It's competing with the Chinese state. Studio Microphone, Section 16. Final thoughts, lessons from the dragon. So what can we learn from China's SOEs? They remind us that economics is not just about supply and demand, it's about power, politics, and purpose. China's model may not be perfect, and its SOEs may face enormous challenges, but they represent a vision, a belief that the state has a role to play in shaping the economy, guiding industry, and defining national destiny. In a time of global uncertainty, soaring inequality, and fractured markets, that vision is more attractive than ever to many. The question is not whether the model will survive, but how far it will go. From the furnaces of industry to the heights of policy, from local power plants to billion-dollar ports overseas, China's SOEs aren't just companies, they're the scaffolding of a new global order. TV, thanks for watching. If you found this documentary insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Right finger or SOEs the future of economic governance? Right finger or are they relics of an unsustainable system?